So they say there's like 12 distinct sub-personalities that make up your personality. You know, who you think you are, who you conceptualize yourself to be, because that's all you can do. You work with concepts. That's what people have been taught to do, for the most part. And certainly with communication, in relaying what you believe to be true, you have to use concepts. It's the only way we can communicate currently. That will change with brain-to-computer interfaces. Then we can communicate raw emotion directly to each other. That will fundamentally change how communication works, and therefore how we think. But for now, all you know is concepts. So, for instance, you look at me, you see the YouTuber, you see Psychotic. Isaac is psychotic. Isaac is depressed. Isaac is in pain. Isaac is alone. Isaac is dying. That's what you see. But that's none of that's, so like, okay, we put all that together. Isaac is a secluded, psychotic, autistic narcissist who's dying alone. That's what you see. That's a concept. These are all concepts. Narcissist, autism. Does autism exist? What is that? What are you talking about? What are you talking about? What is that? Right? It's a word, but like, what is it? What is it? What do you mean? Do we mean like the DSM-5? Like, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about a list of exact symptoms? Are we talking about like a sheet of paper? All this to say, autism doesn't exist. This is a concept. Now, people who we believe to be autistic, people who have autism, so we say, are perhaps different in some ways. And perhaps some of them are different in similar ways to each other. So we group them in this label of autism. But that isn't a thing. We made it up. Let's not forget. People many times on this channel have called me a narcissist. Or, oh, I've been called everything. I've been called everything, good and bad. That's what happens when you're online. But am I those things? Who am I? That's the first question. That's the question I am delivering to you as a messenger. I'm a messenger. I am delivering you a parcel, a message. Here you are. And that message, first, who am I? Or rather, who are you? 2, what do you want? Now, you might think rather simple questions. Or you might think impossible questions, but neither of those is true. The truth is, it's a trick question. Because there's likely more than one of you, at least in your brain. Foolish are we to think there would only be one of you in there. Why would you think that? Why would you think there'd only be one of you in there? What the fuck gave you that stupid idea? Society? Were you taught that? Were you told that you are a person? Were you given a name for everyone to attach other labels to? By the way, a name is just a label. If you think you are your name, if you think I am, in my case, I am Isaac. That's who I am. Really? Okay. You can believe whatever you want. But yeah. So current ideas are that there's likely sub-personalities that make up the personality. And by the way, the personality isn't even in the entirety of who you are. There's the ego, which we would call the self or identity, personality. There's the superego, and there's the id. If we want to go by Freudian concepts, which is just a concept, it doesn't exist, Freudian terms, just concepts, labels, to give meaning to concepts and allow us to convey information. It's how communication works. This is the only way we can relay things. It is fucking primitive. Concepts are fucking primitive. You should feel like a caveman right now, hearing my words. And you should be disgusted with yourself. How could we be sitting in the mud, writhing around in the mud, in our cave, despite all of our technology and all this time in human history? How can we do that? And that's the thing we're still doing until we can communicate directly with emotion. And then that probably isn't even the end stage, but until we can at least do that, we're primitive. We're antiquated. We're alone. We are alone. And all we can do to try to find some connection is communicate concepts to each other. That's it. And they're concepts that we made up. They didn't come from anywhere except us. And they mean everything to us. The concepts mean everything to us, because without them, who are we? We're not Isaac, we're not psychotic, we're not depressed, we're not autistic. These are concepts. So without them, who are we? That's the first thing. So you get the who am I question, and you get the what do I want question. So once you're able to ascertain who you are, then you can ask, what do you want? But again, there's many of you in there, likely. So you can't just ask, like, who am I? Because who is asking that? Who is asking who am I? First off, who is asking it? Secondly, who are you asking it to? Or not you, but who is asking it, and who is that person or that entity asking it to? Right? Okay, so that's the first issue. That's the first issue, but there's another issue. We'll get to that in a second. So, okay, let's say there's distinct personalities in your brain, sub-personalities. What is a sub-personality? Who fucking gives a shit? It's another concept, just like a personality is a concept. So, but there's this, let's say this concept of a sub-personality in your brain. And there's many of them. Let's say 12. The consensus right now is 12. But and one of these subpersonalities asks another subpersonality, "Who are you?" Right? Okay, now we have a more concrete question. Right? Let's say this subpersonality asks this subpersonality, "Who are you?" Okay? Do you see the problem here? The problem is when this subpersonality asks this subpersonality, "Who are you?" This subpersonality then has to take that concept of who are you, who am I, and ask the question to itself. Because it's a concept. Who am I is a concept. And this subpersonality is asking this subpersonality for a concept. It wants a response. It wants a communicative response that makes sense linguistically. We're asking, who am I? If it were telepathic, and perhaps the brain is in some sense, right, with itself, telepathic with itself. But if it were, it wouldn't be asking this question like this, because this is just a way to relay linguistic concepts. Who am I? I want a response. Give me a response. I'm asking a question. Who am I? Right? But when this subpersonality asks the question to itself, because this subpersonality asks this subpersonality, who am I? Then this subperson, or who are you? Who are you? And then this subpersonality has to ask itself, okay, who am I? Yeah, okay, let me figure this question out. I was just asked this question. Who am I? That act of doing that then begs the question, who is asking who? Right? So this subpersonality asks that question, but then that subpersonality has to ask itself, has to take that question and sort of ask itself to get the answer. As we do with all questions, whether you realize that or not, you have to internalize that question. It has to mean something to you. The only way it can mean something to this subpersonality is if this subpersonality has an ego of itself. It has a concept of its own identity, ego, personality, whatever. So are you telling me that subpersonality has a personality? And how far down does that go? Right? So if that subpersonality can internalize the question of who am I, because this subpersonality asks that subpersonality, which must happen, because I can ask myself who am I, and I can give myself answers, right? Whether or not those answers are real or true, it doesn't matter. I can ask it and not know the answer, and then I can think about it and get answers. And the question is, even when I'm asking myself, who am I? Who is asking who? But then there's the subpersonalities who also can ask those questions. And the question is, are those subpersonalities also do they have subpersonalities? And how far down does that go? And is all concept linguistics, communication, is it all the same? If you go down far enough, what do we get to, right? Like, just logically, what do we get to? When you're asking, who am I? You go down far enough in that little chain we've now constructed of this personality has an ego, therefore it might have subpersonalities just like we do, therefore, all the way down. What do you get to? And we've just started understanding that the concept of an ego and a personality might not be all that real. We've just started that, because Freud set us back. We thought he took us forward, but perhaps he set us back. And now we're seeing, well, maybe because it seems like one person is one person, right? I mean, you see them, they look like themselves when you see them from one day to the next. They age, they change in ways, but that's what people do. So we have conceptualized. And so that's normal. But what if that's a facade? What if we are constructed by many personalities, and for people who are mentally healthy, those personalities tend to conform and unify for the most part. No one does 100%, but for the most part, in a way that allows them to navigate society where people perceive them and their concepts as fairly stable. But people who are mentally not as healthy, are they somehow different? Are they different types of people? Where they can seem different from one day to the next? totally different in some cases from one day to the next. It's like you're a different person. Thought I knew you. These are phrases we use constantly. How could you do that? How could you do that? I couldn't even conceive of you doing something like that. Anyway, that is the message I was asked to relay to you. By who? I don't know. I could give you a word or a name or something, but let's be real, that wouldn't change anything. Wouldn't do anything for you. Just like calling yourself narcissistic or autistic or whatever doesn't actually change you or allow people to better conceptualize who you actually are. Although we think it does. That's not the truth. It's our best attempt at the truth for now, unfortunately. But changes are happening. We are evolving every day. We're forced to. There's no painfully forced to evolve.